Anton sat at his desk, the wood cool beneath his palms. 2 envelopes lay before him. One was marked Safety in crisp, black ink. The other bore the label Opportunity. Most people saw them as the same thing, 2 sides of the same coin, but Anton knew better. He picked up the first. It felt substantial, heavy with the weight of caution. He tapped it against the desk, listening to the dull thud of paper against oak. Then he reached for the second. It was lighter, thinner,
yet carried a charge that made the air in the room seem thinner. He laid them side by side, perfectly parallel,
creating a stark divide on the desk surface. His gaze flickered between the two, an unspoken calculation happening behind his eyes. The room was silent, save for the steady tick of the clock on the wall. He was not just looking at paper, he was looking at his future. He took a breath, his fingers hovering over the edges of the envelopes, feeling the friction of the paper against his skin. This was the moment of decision, the point where logic met intent. He pulled his hands back, letting the quiet settle around him, fully aware that the choice he made now would define the ground he stood on tomorrow. Anton reached for the safety envelope, his movements precise and rhythmic. He slid the contents into the fireproof box, the paper rustling against the reinforced lining. The box was heavy, cold, and smelled of industrial enamel. He pressed the lid down until the latch clicked with a sharp, metallic finality. He did not rush this. He knew that this box was his shield against the unpredictable. When the car failed on a lonely road, or when the paychecks stopped arriving, this box would be the only thing standing between him and the chaos of the world. He pushed the box into the hidden compartment beneath his desk. It did not grow in size or interest, and it promised no sudden wealth. It was not an engine for growth, but it was a fortress. He ran his palm over the smooth, fire-resistant surface, feeling the weight of his own foresight. Each movement was a deliberate act of protection. He checked the seal once more, ensuring the lock was engaged. He stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, and stepped back to look at the desk. The space where the envelope had rested was now empty, but the weight of his security was firmly anchored in the steel box beneath him. He was ready for the storm. The room felt different now that the safety net was locked away. Anton turned from his desk to the kitchen, where a stack of mail waited on the counter. He sorted through it with practiced indifference. A glossy brochure for a new vehicle, a high-end travel catalog, a notification for a premium membership. Each item represented a potential leak in his foundation. He took the stack and moved it directly to the shredder. The machine hummed to life, devouring the paper with a rhythmic, tearing sound. This was the cost of his tomorrow.
He made his coffee at home, the steam rising in the quiet morning light, while he calculated the cost of the convenience he was choosing to forego. Every dollar saved was a brick in the wall he was building against the unknown.
He sat at the small table, looking at the bare walls of his apartment. It was not a life of abundance, but it was a life of control. When the afternoon sun hit the window, he checked his calendar.
A friend had invited him to an expensive dinner downtown. He picked up his pen, wrote a short refusal, and set the note aside.
He did not feel the loss of the experience. Instead, he felt the tightening of his own resolve. He knew exactly what he was trading: the fleeting pleasure of an evening for the permanent silence of a future without panic. Anton returned to his desk, but his posture had changed. The heavy metal box was tucked away, silent and secure.
Now he reached for the second envelope, the one labeled Opportunity. He tore the seal.
The sound loud in the quiet room. He did not hesitate. He opened his laptop, the screen blooming with a harsh, blue light that washed out the desk's surface. He entered his account credentials, his fingers moving with rhythmic familiarity. This was not the realm of locks and keys. This was the realm of currents, numbers, and shifting tides. He navigated to the trading interface, a web of glowing, flickering charts that pulsed with data.
He moved his capital into the volatile engine of the market. The numbers began to scroll.
a rapid, frantic stream of information that felt like a living thing. He pushed his chair back, the wheels rolling smoothly over the floorboards, and planted his feet. The air in the room felt thinner, charged with the sudden weight of risk. He stared at the screen, watching the first lines of his wealth begin to vibrate with the market's own erratic heartbeat. The foundation was set, and now the ceiling was beginning to rise. He was no longer just protecting what he had. He was reaching for what he could build. The screen flickered, then the charts turned a violent shade of red. The numbers did not just fall, they plummeted. 20% of his capital vanished in the span of a few seconds. A sharp, rhythmic thumping started in his chest, a drumbeat of pure adrenaline. Anton gripped the armrests of his chair until his knuckles turned white. He could feel the heat rising in his neck, the primal urge to click sell and stop the bleeding. The room seemed to shrink. The air grew heavy. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to intervene, to pull his assets back into the safety of the dark. He watched the ticker tape spin downward, a relentless stream of loss that defied his logic.
His pulse hammered against his throat, a frantic, irregular rhythm that matched the erratic movement of the data.
He did not blink. He did not pull away. The loss was a physical weight, pressing down on his lungs, making every breath a conscious effort. He stared at the plummeting figures, his jaw locked tight, holding his ground as his wealth dissolved before his eyes. The panic was real, clawing at his nerves, but he refused to let his hands move from the chair.
The panic did not vanish. It settled into his bones like a deep, freezing ache. Outside, the world continued, but inside the room, time seemed to grind to a halt. Anton forced his hands to remain flat against the armrests.
His fingers splayed, refusing to reach for the mouse.
Every nerve ending screamed for him to stop the slide, to click, to sell, to escape. He focused on the rhythm of his own lungs.
Inhaling slowly, counting the seconds, he watched the screen, not as a source of loss, but as a test of his resolve. He knew the math was sound, but math meant nothing if his temperament failed.
He sat in the chair, a statue of deliberate inaction, while the numbers continued their erratic descent.
He ignored the noise, the flickering red, and the frantic internal dialogue that demanded a reaction.
He did not blink. He did not shift his weight.
He held his gaze on the data until the blurred figures began to sharpen into a pattern of predictable cycles. His heart rate slowed, matching the steady, measured beat of his own discipline. He was winning the war against his own biology, proving that the ability to remain still was the greatest asset he possessed. The red numbers stalled, then shifted back to green. As the chart crawled upward, the tension in Anton's shoulders finally broke. He leaned back, the screen's glow reflecting in his eyes. He looked at the two imaginary envelopes on his desk. He saw the trap clearly now. Those who poured everything into the market before building a base were building on shifting sand, waiting for the first storm to collapse their world. He had seen them panic when the tide turned. Then, he looked at the other extreme. Those who hoarded every cent in a vault, never letting it work, watched as time slowly ate their wealth away, leaving them safe but hollow. They were stagnant, trapped by a fear that masqueraded as wisdom. Anton traced a line on his desk with his finger, drawing a boundary. He realized that safety without growth was a slow decay, and growth without safety was a gamble with his future. The realization hit him with the force of a physical weight. He did not need to choose one path. He needed to synchronize them. He saw the path forward, not as a conflict, but as a deliberate, two-part design.
Anton stood up and paced the length of the room. He needed to anchor this thought, to give it weight. He looked at his desk and mentally divided the surface. He designated the savings account as his floor. It was the solid ground beneath his feet, the foundation that remained unmoved when the world shook. It was not there to grow into a mountain. It was there to keep him from falling into the abyss. He tested the concept, pacing faster. If the floor was the foundation,
Then the investment portfolio was the ceiling. It was his engine for reach, the space where he pushed upward, expanding his potential toward the sky. He could not have one without the other. Without the floor, the ceiling would eventually succumb to gravity and crush him. Without the ceiling, the floor would become his prison, a low roof that never allowed him to stand tall. He stopped pacing and looked at the wall, visualizing the structure. He would build the floor first. Only when the foundation was hardened and immovable would he begin to construct the ceiling above it. The order was not a suggestion, it was the architecture of his survival. He had his blueprint. Anton sat back down, the silence in the room no longer heavy, but sharp. He began to organize his documents, not with the frantic energy of a man chasing profit, but with the calm precision of an architect. He placed the savings statement at the base of his stack. It was solid. It was immovable. By securing the floor first, he felt the internal pressure of uncertainty vanish. He no longer looked at the market with a racing pulse. He now viewed the volatility as a tool, something to be managed from the safety of his foundation. He took a pen and marked a clear separation between the two accounts. The order was absolute. He realized that for years he had been fighting the tide, but by choosing the sequence floor then ceiling, he had essentially rewritten the rules of his own existence. The anxiety of what if was replaced by the confidence of what is. He stood up, his movements deliberate and efficient. He was no longer a passenger to his financial circumstances. He was the one who held the blueprint. He looked at his hands, steady and capable, and felt the weight of a decade of discipline finally coalesce into a singular, undeniable power. Anton reached out and clicked the latch on the fireproof box. The metallic snap echoed in the quiet room, final and absolute. He did not linger. He picked up his keys and walked toward the exit, his pace measured, devoid of the frantic energy that once defined his mornings. He paused at the door, his hand resting on the cold handle. He looked back at the desk, now cleared of clutter, the blueprint of his life firmly locked in place. He was not walking out to see what the day would bring. He was walking out to execute a plan. The uncertainty of the future did not loom over him. He had built his floor to withstand the tremors, and he had built his ceiling to reach for the heights. He turned the handle, pulled the door open, and stepped out into the light. The city stretched out before him, chaotic and unpredictable as ever, but he did not flinch. He moved with the steady, rhythmic stride of a man who had replaced the blind roll of the dice with the sharp, clear lines of design. He walked into the crowd, not as a victim of chance, but as the architect of his own path.